It is now perfectly clear that we were lied to. And we were lied to at a very high level from very, very early on by both the vaccine companies in terms of the ability of the vaccine to prevent transmission. And we were also lied to by our politicians who apparently knew better. And they just kept lying. And this is creating, you want to know why there's mistrust in the institutions? It would be because of this kind of stuff. It's because you have experts who are constantly telling the platonic lie to people. And people who want to have faith in the experts, because you have to use heuristics when it comes to the world, right? You can't study down on every single issue. When you go to the doctor, the reason you go to the doctor is because you didn't have time to go to medical school. Right? The reason you go to the plumber is because you didn't have time to learn to become a plumber. The reason that you go to the mechanic is because you don't know how to take cars apart. You have to rely on the expertise of another human being who has spent an inordinate amount of time studying an issue. And then you have to sort of take that data and use it as best you can. Now, it can be that you distrust the data. It can be you don't trust the people who are giving you the data. But the big problem here is that when you have an entire institution like the scientific institutions or the government, and the government is issuing lies in order to get you to do a thing, and then it turns out that these things are lies, well, people's distrust in the institution is going to skyrocket, right? Again, if you outsource your plumbing to a plumber and the plumber just keeps clogging the lines, at a certain point, you don't use that plumber anymore. If you keep taking your car to the mechanic and the mechanic drops the engine out the bottom of the car, you're not going to go to that mechanic ever again. Well, the same thing is true when it comes to the lies that we were apparently told about the ability of the vaccines to block transmission. So, for example, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a Pfizer executive who was being grilled by members of the ECR, the EU, the European Commission. And this Pfizer executive basically said that they never even tested the COVID jab to determine whether it controlled transmission or not. This is an astonishing acknowledgement. She was asked a question, and her name is Janine Small. She was Pfizer's president of international developed markets. She made this admission before the European Union Parliament. She was asked by European Union member of Parliament Rob Roos if the company tested the mRNA vaccine on stopping transmission before they rolled it out. And here is what she said.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market.
But you didn't move at the speed of science. In fact, it turns out that you were basically lying to the American public and to the global public about the ability of these vaccines to stop transmission, which is an amazing, amazing thing because, again, huge swaths of people who are pushing vax mandates. So I never pushed vaccine mandates. My company actually sued to prevent the Biden vax mandate from going forward in the United States with regard to OSHA. But this was pushed on the basis that you would not infect mom and dad if you got the vax yourself. You did it for the community. You didn't just get the vax for yourself. You got the vax for the community. Well, if you got the vax for yourself, good for you. I mean, that was your choice. But again, the idea that was promoted, and it makes me really, really angry to be lied to by these people, especially because these people then continue to claim their expertise. They continue to claim that we should believe them on everything. And then they whine that people don't believe the science. You never presented science. Instead, you presented a platonic lie about what exactly was going to happen if people took the vax. It was going to die down. There would be no more transmission. And what's more, it turns out the Biden White House knew this and they promoted the lie anyway. This is truly amazing stuff here. According to the Washington Post, this was basically glossed over in nearly all the media. I'm not sure anybody caught it. So the Washington Post did this long story. It came out just on Sunday or Saturday. It was called Inside the Successes, Missteps, and Failures of Biden's Early Presidency. And it was sort of a recapitulation of the first year and 2/3 of the Biden presidency, which have been a gigantic failure. And they talk in this article about Joe Biden's COVID response. And here's what the Washington Post says, quote, from the start, Biden's COVID response was anchored around two ideas. He would follow the science, and the science would show the way to ending the pandemic. After his first meeting with his COVID team, he gave them a pep talk. He said, I know this is going to be hard. I know there will be ups and downs. Things will not always go smoothly, but promise me this. You will tell me when there's a problem. You will put it on the table, and together we can solve it. For months afterward, he had a catchphrase he would use. Tell me what to do, docs, the president would frequently say. But the reality was more complicated. Pfizer-BioNTech announced after the 2020 elections that their vaccine was more than 90% effective at preventing infection. Weeks later, Moderna announced over 94% efficacy at preventing infection. We still have not seen where that data came from, since it turns out not to be remotely true. That was the data that people like me were citing back in December 2020 when we suggested that it was important to get the vaccine. Again, being anti-mandate, because I don't believe that the government should mandate this sort of stuff, because, again, the vaccine protects you once you take it yourself, and the number of people who couldn't take the vaccine was vanishingly low. But the stats that were being put out there by Moderna and Pfizer apparently were just not true. Nearly everything the president and his scientific advisors assumed for the next 6 months hinged on those numbers, even though it had become clear that the vaccines, though highly effective at stopping death and hospitalization, did a far worse job of blocking infection than originally expected as potency waned and new, more transmissible variants emerged. Okay, so this is the Washington Post admitting that by June of 2021, it was perfectly clear that the vaccines were not actually stopping transmission. Still, the political imperative remained, says the Washington Post. As the July 4th celebration drew closer, Biden flagged to his staff that they need to add some caveats to his remarks, echoing the warnings he had been issuing about potential variants in the weeks prior. His top advisors worked to scale back the tone, cutting several overly triumphant lines, and added some fine print with cautions like COVID-19 has not been vanquished. But the event went on as planned, and the message delivered was ultimately one of victory. Biden said we are emerging from the darkness. Just 3 weeks later, spurred in part by a Delta outbreak among a highly vaccinated population in Provincetown, Massachusetts, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommended that even fully vaccinated people wear masks indoors. 62% of the nation approved of how Biden was handling the COVID pandemic in late June, shortly before he gave the speech. That number fell 10 percentage points to 52% approval in late August and September, 47% by November, dragging down his overall rating, according to the Washington Post ABC News polling. We go with what we know at the time with the best possible information with what the experts are telling us, and we do our best, said Mike Donilon, a senior Biden advisor. That is an amazing sequence of events. So according to the Washington Post, again, they said that it was clear that the potency was waning, that people were getting infected, and Biden went ahead and declared independence anyway because he needed the win. And then he went ahead and tried to backfill that by suggesting a vax mandate. And remember, this remained the Biden line up until today, is that you need a vax mandate in the workplace. He's still suing to get OSHA to force employees to get vaccinated. On what basis? On what basis? On the basis that the vaccines are supposed to stop transmission. But we now know that we were lied to by everyone. We were lied to by the scientists. We were lied to by Pfizer. We were lied to by the government. We were lied to by the Biden administration. We were lied to. I don't like being lied to. I don't know about you. And it makes me not believe these people. Now, again, I think that it can be easy to take this too far. I think there are people out there who will say, I will never believe any doctor who talks to me again about this stuff. I will never believe the CDC. No, what it just means is that you have to now verify. But you can't use them as an expert heuristic. You now actually do have to do your own research. And that's a problem because society doesn't have time for that. When you are no longer able to go to a plumber, and when you're no longer able to go to the mechanic because they're all bad at their jobs, you're no longer able to go to anybody. You can't go to your doctor because your doctor might be lying to you. What are you supposed to do exactly? You can't be a jack of all trades. The answer is we need to build up new institutions. The answer is that we need to build up alternative institutions that we can actually trust. But that's going to take a long time and serious effort, and that's going to have to be a major American project. Everybody who's involved in this sort of stuff needs to be thrown out of office. If they're in the private sector, they need to be fired. There may need to be actual criminal prosecutions if you are disseminating false health information to people on the basis of zero evidence. This is nasty and horrific. And again, the way that the Pfizer lady justified all of this is she said, well, there are certain studies that say we may have saved 20 million lives. Okay, well, let's say that that's true. You also lied to the public about this stuff in order to get them to do a thing you wanted them to do, which in free democracies is supposed to be bad.